And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's take this further. Our next session is on the Influencer Playbook, new rules of engagement. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with our panel discussion that's on the Influencer Playbook, new rules of engagement. For this, I would request Mr. Naresh Gupta, co-founder and managing partner, Bang in the Middle, to please join me on the dais. Can we have you, sir? Hi. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. I would request Ms. Archana Agarwal, Vice President Media, Airtel. Can we have you, ma'am? Hi. Mr. Amit Garg, AGM, Healthcare, OTC, Dabur, India. Can we have a big round of applause for our panelists, please? We have amongst us Mr. Sagar Push, founder and CEO, Clan Connect. Our next panelist is Soumyadeep Chatterjee, Director, Brand Marketing, Snapdeal. Can we have you? Hi, thank you so much. Once again, a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk on new rules of engagement, the Influencer Playbook. I would request Mr. Gupta to please take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Quite behind schedules. We'll try and do this quicker than what normally we would have done. I think also one person lesser on the panel. So let's start. And as we were discussing previously, there is today what happens in the world of influencer marketing is that the influencers have started to become almost like quasi-celebrities. But as a brand, how do you handle the fact that the influencer might have done a post just a couple of days before for a competing brand? And because they are influencers and they are not really bound by a brand and there is no exclusivity that they would normally have. So how do brands handle something like this? Because this is literally walking through the store and saying good things about every brand that you come across. So how does that work? How do people handle that? Is there things that brands look at? Archana, if we can start with you.
Yeah, so obviously influencers, as you said, they are not, they may not be brand loyal, but they are key opinion leaders for brands, right? When you work with an influencer. I think the most important thing is, at least what we look at is what's the content they're posting, right? And if you think about it from an influencer's perspective, right? Let's take influencers who are in, say, automobile influencers who talk about new launches. If they are, they've been they're hired by brand A and they're going to do some content pieces for brand A, but at the same time, brand B is also launching a brand. They've launched a new car, for example. Then, as an automobile influencer, they will have to talk about that brand, which is the new brand B, while they are an influencer for brand A. I think from brand's perspective, it's very important to see what is it that they are talking, what is the influencer saying when they are talking about, say, any of competitive brand. Are they actually promoting the brand or they're just giving out information? I think that distinction or differentiation becomes very critical, because why do people follow influencers? They follow influencers because they're giving out information on something, or they're doing it in a manner which is quirky or funny or maybe serious or whatever. But that is why somebody is following, and they're an expert or they have an opinion on various products, right? And hence, at least at Airtel, we keep following we work with fewer influencers, one, and we also keep seeing what is this influencer constantly posting? What is it? Is it a promotion of of competition, or is it just about information about competition? And there's that differentiation in my mind becomes very important, right? So that is something which we definitely look at.
But influencers, for instance, are of all kinds, and I'm not this directing just to you. For instance, there are today almost every film star from any kind of language available to be an influencer. They're not endorsing the brand, but they're willing to come on board and say a few good things about the brand. How do you handle as a brand the same issue? Because, for instance, you are the telecom business. You might have seen that particular celebrity say good things about one handset. next day second handset, third day third handset, and you know that the celebrity may not be using any of the handsets they're talking about. They may actually be using another brand for which they're not being the influencer. Does that impact you as a brand and eventually the consumers that you're talking to?
See, I'm assuming you're making a differentiation between the celebrity and an influencer, right? So, if I'm talking celebrity, typically when celebrities endorse brands, you very rarely do you have a competing brand coming and working with that celebrity. I really don't remember any example where you're using celebrities to work with, who work on competing brands, unless and until the contract of one brand is over. But brands would, like, you would use a celebrity maybe when you're announcing or launching something, which is, and the reason you could be using that celebrity is maybe because of the pull that they have, and it's just about one post. It's not really a complete brand endorsement, but more, I think in my mind, more using the celebrity in a manner to drive eyeballs to your brand launch or product launch or some new news that you're giving on the brand. At least that's the way we've used if I'm qualifying that as celebrities.
Samidhi, from your perspective, now when you're looking at the same thing, would you work with somebody who has just posted about Flipkart or Myntra or Amazon, or will completely cut them out and not use them?
Well, unless the influencer is also my spouse, I'm not expecting loyalty from that person. So it's a channel, right? I mean, the same driver drives for Ola, drives for Uber. Nobody owns any of these assets. So marketing is just like a channel. If I expect loyalty, it will be foolish to expect that, okay, if I'm advertising on this particular channel, say on Star, no other brand will advertise. So that way, it's not about loyalty at all. It's just purely a channel. Now, the other aspect also what Archana mentioned is about whether that influencer, what they are talking about, or are they, endorsing every single product. And that's clearly actually not the brand's concern at all. Because if an influencer continues to do that, eventually that influence factor will go down and the numbers will reflect. One can have X number of followers and all that, that bots can boost up, but engagements will go down. So it's more of a prerogative of the influencer, not of the brand. And on the third aspect of influencers via, vis-a-vis celebrities, the call of whether to sign on an influencer who is, or a celebrity who is, endorsing everything is, again, it's a very, very micro issue, which I think happens when a marketer or a marketing team is very lazy when they're not doing their research, right? Because if an influencer is being signed only because they have, say, a huge number of followers and they're posting, say, 10, pieces of content every week, for us, and I think for most of us, it's a clear red flag. We will never work with that influencer. That influencer will get filtered out much earlier in the process. Having said that, generally, I think most of the brands, what we see, from, Snapdeal is a lifestyle marketplace, right? With its own house of brand and all that. Generally, what we see other players also, other competitors also in the space doing, is they have stopped doing only single content piece deals with these influencers. Generally, it is split across a season. Say, for example, it's summer, so we say that, okay, across summer, if you are doing, say, Western wear, you will do 6 content pieces for us. And they're free to do ethnic, they're free to do footwear for other brands.
I just wanted to add, just like brands sign up celebrities for proper brand endorsements, I think the same work gets done for influencers. To your point, the kind of content and the influencers to synergize with your brand, right? It's like, an automobile company going and signing up a food blogger or a food influencer, unless there's no match. So that becomes very critical, and I agree with the point that you can't be just signing an influencer because they have a huge number of followers, because if there is no brand synergy, then if they put out content also, their followers are going to reject the content. They will say, like, this content, I don't know why you even, and followers actually do that, right? If they do reject content if it is not in the persona of that influencer.
How do you look at it from a FMCG brand? And because you would then be pushing out a lot more content, because for you, the value system and the way you're looking at the brand and the brand world is very different from, say, what a marketplace would look at. Because they are everyday transaction. For you, I think you have to balance out between brand imagery and what commerce it drives. So how do you balance that out? How does it work for a large packaged good brand?
So I think I bit differ basically for FMCG brands. There are lot of things at stake, as you were rightly saying. So brand equity becomes very important for FMCG brand. So and also at what is the challenge that the brand is facing, which it wants to get it sorted from the influencer. For example, if there's a confectionery brand that is launching new variants, so maybe he is fine. So if an influencer does it and maybe a week or 10 days later does other. But for a brand where there are 3 or 4 players and there is a competitive scenario, and he wants to build a proposition versus competition through the influencer. So then for that particular proposition, it becomes very important that the influencer which is selected does not do maybe after 3 days or 4 days another brand, because then it doubts on the brand also. The overall objective of selecting an influencer and promoting a proposition does not get solved through this. Also, what type of influencer you are taking, that will also play a role. So for example, if you are taking a mega influencer, you're investing good monies on that. So you don't want that mega influencer to promote a competition brand also after a day. So for that, we normally do a contract with him, maybe for a period of 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months also. And what we try to do with these mega influencers, that we also try to establish a long-term relationship with them. Because how it will happen, because it will happen that through that mega influencer, you will reach a certain audience and you can promote your new things also through them, because they have a certain section which follows them. So I think it becomes very critical at what stage, what is the challenge that the brand is facing, and what type of influencers. So if you are taking nano influencers or micro influencers, then still you can go with that. But if you are taking big influencers, then obviously it becomes very critical.
If we move on, now, I really don't know how the entire bit of influencer marketing works. Is this a big ecosystem built by young people for young people? And is that what is working in the market? Or there is a bigger play involved here, and then people do really look at what somebody else is saying and end up buying? Because I think a lot of brands will want to work with influencers, not just to buy reach, but also to buy commerce.
Yes, I agree to what you're saying. In fact, a lot of points made by the panelists are true. I would like to quickly just touch upon that. Today, influencer marketing is considered very, the way brands look at it is more serious. And it is not just brand's problem to see whether the influencer is working with another brand or not. Influencers too are very cognizant of the fact that if they don't sound serious about the content they're making, they will also not get work. So I think this ecosystem has kind of evolved to a much mature way of engaging with influencers at this point of time. To your question specifically, yes, the creator economy is largely driven by young people, and it is, and we are a data-led, technology platform. It is only the 1 or 2% of the influencers who fall in that macro mega category. Majority of them, and the ones who are budding today, are all nano micro influencers, and brands have now realized, and they are looking at newer ways of engaging with these kind of smaller influencers, largely for content amplification. It doesn't so much matter for them whether they are working with another brand or not, because for example, we just worked with and we keep working, it's a leading sportswear and fashion brand. And they wanted micro and all kinds of influencers, largely not the megas, to go to a store launch in Bombay where Anushka Sharma was coming, and they just wanted content to be created and amplified. And they just engaged with micro and nano influencers and worked beautifully for them. And they've been, they've just replicated this thing, and they're doing it for every other, activity that's there. one thing that is going to drive influencer marketing and the way it has shaped up the markets like China and US is how are you driving commerce using influencers. And that's a big problem in our digital industry as such in India, where attribution is a big challenge. You don't know how to attribute a particular sale to a channel, you know, because every channel, if you run a performance marketing campaign in the funnel, you know, a Facebook, a Google, everyone will say, you know, that the customer came through because there's some interaction at some point and they're able to identify that particular customer. But having said that, I think we are also working on that model to solve that problem, because brands today also want to see how much of that last mile conversion is actually happening using those influencers. Of course, they do play a very big role in you know, essentially, so to say, influencing the buying decision. But how many of them are actually buying? I think the next wave is going to be driven by this entire attribution and making, you know, adding more performance element to the entire influencer marketing piece.
Just one second. So I think the point you made about attribution, I mean, that in itself is a Pandora's box, right? And there should be a whole session, maybe next time, you know, Vijaya can take a note. The next time there should be a whole session on this attribution, because I think everybody is sort of fighting the same battle where, and absolutely right, that Facebook, Google, everybody is saying that that sale came from me. When the sale drops, everybody says it's not our fault. And I think it would be the same for you also. Most brands who are operating in this mass space have clearly demarcated that, okay, these influencers are for my top funnel, these are for middle, and these are bottom, right? So that's also sorts a lot of issues, that what you're expecting from that particular category of influencers.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, the fact is there's already some level of social commerce which has started with influencers, where they give their code and saying you'll get some discounts and stuff. So some bits have started. Obviously, we have to see where it goes. But coming to the question you asked in terms of, is it for young people, you know, young people doing something for young people? Agree that a large majority is young, but I don't think it's only for young people, right? There are all age groups who are following all kinds of influencers, and it's all depending on, as I said again, how the personality of the influencer, what the person talks about, and whether it's relevant for me or not, right? So I think it's all kinds of ages who are following influencers. It's not necessarily, there's a large majority could be young, but there are other age groups which are also following.
And also the definition of what is young. I mean,
exactly.
I think 45 is young.
Age is just a number.
No,
right?
why I asked that question was because this entire bit of influencers, and I hear this from a lot of people saying, I want to be an influencer. So it's now a defined career choice for an average 25-year-old or maybe even younger. And which is why I'm saying that how much would a 20-year-old influence a 50-year-old? And I'm not saying it in any other way, but from the fact that you might see life very differently and the 20-year-old may see the life very differently. Some categories, yes, but take the more expensive categories. For instance, I am very big in photography. Now, I don't think a 20-year-old can come and tell me that this is the camera you should buy or this is the lens you should buy. I believe I can do the reverse on that. Yes, there are a few photographers who can do that, but that's a very specialized category. In fashion, in telecom, in handsets, in say, wearables, that might change. And that's where I was asking that question of saying, have we built this by young people for young people? And there is nothing wrong in that. I'm just asking, is that how it has got built today, and is that what we are seeing happen?
So I have 2 pointers to that. One is, if you look at influencers purely as a channel, right? Now, obviously, if you look at movies, say movies or, you know, movies as a channel, right? So you look at, there is obviously a Martin Scorsese, which has a certain audience, but there is also, say, a Damien Chazelle, who has a certain audience. So it's not about a young guy telling a veteran, okay, this is what you should buy. That person has a different audience for a very different sort of content to be created. He's advising that person, some influencer or whatever, Twitter, voice of Twitter. So people who have money, they're trying to get influence. People who have influence, if you look at, started with Kanye and now, the Kardashians and all that, people who have already built a community are now building a business on top of that. Like TechBurner is the latest example, right? If you look at Bhuvan Bam and all that. So people who have already built a community are now figuring out, yeah, how do I sort of monetize this? So this is the convergence, is what is happening. People with money trying to create fame, people with fame now try to create money out of that. And that is where I think that question also sort of meets in the middle.
From your perspective, and because attribution is a big issue that has been raised, you run a very different kind of business. I mean, he runs a different business, you run a different business. Is attribution such a critical factor in the call that you would take? And is that same question I'm asking, is this influencer ecosystem a lot more built on a certain kind of brand and audience and a stage of lifestyle that the brand looks at?
So I think it's very important that for a certain category, because I think the saying still holds, like minds attract like minds. So, for example, if it's an immunity product which is there, so obviously, or it's a health protein or something, so obviously you will take an influencer who also impediments that particular characteristics. So he should be a healthy person. You can't take a fat person for a influencer for that. So, so similarly for the age group also, a 35-year-old guy might also get influenced by a 20-year-old guy by the fitness things. So it's not exactly the age, but it's more the like-mindedness that makes you go through an influencer and gets his attention. So I think that's more critical rather than the age factor, because now even the 45-year people wants to look young from that perspective. So I think that is the more important thing from the FMCG perspective also. So for example, if we are promoting Dabur honey, so honey, if we are promoting as a slim thing, so even a 50-year-old lady wants to become slim by looking at a 20-year-old lady looking who becomes her influencer. So I think that is more critical at this stage.
And now that you've said it about a bit of nutraceuticals and health and stuff like that, that's where the question that I wanted to ask is, how do you handle this entire influencer fraud that's happening? Because today that's a bit of a mess. Some of the biggest names have pushed products that were clearly dubious. Don't want to take names, but some of them should, in another country, might have got arrested for doing what they've done, because they clearly broke possibly hundreds of laws to make that happen. Now, as a brand, how do you handle that? How do you handle the issue of saying who you worked with might have a dubious past? Would you not work with them?
So I think it's a very valid point. So I think there the AI has started playing a very important role, which was not there a couple of years back. It has started. So we are now becoming very cautious, as you are saying, in terms of using AI tools, in terms of screening the influencers, what is the past content which they have done, what is their credibility. So these have become very critical. So because and also we make the influencers also try the product before influencing anything. So that becomes mandatory. Plus there are certain clinical studies, regulations that we go through before signing them. So as I was saying, so this becomes very critical, so that the influencers tomorrow does not put any wrong things about the product or has a past where he has done some fraud. So that becomes very critical. Plus, unlike celebrities in mass advertising, where we used to do long contracts of 1 year, 2 years, with influencers, you don't do that type of contract. It's a short contract of 1 month, 3 months. So, so that way you are not very bound. So I think these two are the checks of AI tools that we do while selecting an influencer, and obviously more regulatory, more clinical studies sharing with it, so that tomorrow he cannot say that this particular product which I have tried does not give that required benefits which I was told by the. So that's taken care while signing an influencer for the brands.
Influencer frauds, how do you handle that?
So, the starting point of any influencer selection earlier used to be the number of followers or subscribers that they have. That itself is a big fraud. So we have, as a tool, because we have API integrations with Instagram and YouTube, we are able to actually, with permission of course, we don't do crawling and all that, we are able to see the usage pattern and the followers which the influencer starts gaining from the time the influencer comes on my platform. I definitely don't know the past, but there is certain correlative algorithm that you can build, that if I have got 100,000 followers, but my engagement rate is always at 2%, 3%, my reach of a particular content is not growing beyond a certain number, then perhaps the number that 100K that I'm talking about is not genuine, because and you see, and there are, then you what you can also go and look at these profiles is that, and these are very kind of deterministic numbers or data points. There is a profile which will have no content posted in since the time they have been created. There is a profile which is following 500 people, but there's no one following them. These are all clear indicators that these are fake profiles, and they have been, bought, essentially, bought as in kharida gaya unko, and just to enhance the numbers. In terms of, I think brands have become very conscious, and they have, all of them have voiced this out, that there are different ways to ensure that the content which is getting generated or created is genuine. You are signing up contracts with these influencers to ensure that they are not, creating or competing with rival brands. Brands have also become very conscious of the fact that some of the content that they create comes out very good and is very viral. So what they also do, and this is something that we have seen largely with all brands now that work with us, is they engage in all media rights kind of a deal, where they can use their content, and if it's, of course it's digital, so they can promote by using paid media, because that content is doing really well. And why not boost it on Instagram and YouTube and get more out of the engagement or the contract that you're having with the influencer. So I think there are ways and means to ensure that the fraud is kept in place, and influencers also, I would definitely say that they are also becoming much more cognizant of the fact that there has to be a salience and seriousness in terms of the language that they are trying to speak on their social media handle, and that is also taking care of this bit of how to manage the tonality, the fraud, the numbers, and all that.
Archana, how do you look at this entire thing happening today? I mean, there are lots of these very, very big names who have sold some very dubious crypto products which have run into problem. There is the other problem they've run into because they've given their name to a dubious forum. People landed, didn't find them. They're big names. Now, how do you handle that whole bit?
So, I think at Airtel, whoever we work with, I think we've carefully chosen the people, the influencers that we work with, in terms of the kind of content they've posted in the past, how relevant it is from a brand standpoint. And so those are things, those checks and balances are already in place, right? If I look at and if there's an influencer who's worked in the past, everybody makes a mistake. You can forgive it once, and it's very old back, years ago. And as long as the influencers continue to post positive content, is now associated with the right kind of brands, or is maybe not even associated, but doing the relevant positive stuff, then I think there is no harm if it's relevant for a brand to associate with that influencer. But yes, if the influencer continues to be associated with dubious products and forums and things like that, then obviously brands don't want to get associated. I mean, we've seen that whether it's an influencer or a celebrity, if there is any kind of negative story or negative impact, it does have a rub-off on brands. We've seen where consumers suddenly start uninstalling a particular brand's app just because they were associated. I mean, with that. I wasn't referring to yours, but so I think and I think brands have now smartened up, right? They're smart enough to, they may get duped once where they would have gone with an influencer who's had spurious followers. But there are now enough tools in place, and there are agencies who have enough and more tools, and lots of agencies have developed their own tools to understand, followers, engagement rates, as you mentioned, of an influencer. Like, for example, if an influencer suddenly gets 20% in followers in a month's time or a week's time, then there's something wrong, right? You will investigate, or you'll figure out. Like, we look at not only the followers, as we also look at what was the kind of engagement that this influencer has given to and if we see that the engagement is not really, consistent, then we do have conversations, because I mean, it's not about like, oh, one piece did not get the engagement, so you should drop the person, because there's some level of brand, some level of loyalty that you have to also give to the influencer. It works both ways, right? There's to be a win-win situation between the brand and the influencer. So, even if one piece didn't work, you can go figure out what didn't work. Because if some content piece did not work, then that's something you have to avoid when you're doing the next pieces of content, either not only with that influencer, but even with the other influencers. I think that becomes important.
Sagar, from a platform ownership perspective, where do you see this whole piece go? I'm raising that issue from two perspectives. One, the government suddenly seems to have woken up, so there are a lot of safeguards they want to put in. The platforms are putting in safeguards, they are putting in their own things. In this whole thing, and then because you run a platform, where do you see this whole thing evolve to? Where do you see this thing go?
So, I mean, I'm a firm believer of the fact that no matter how many platforms or automation you build, in terms of running a particular campaign or there'll always be a model where there is an agency kind of a model, because brands have got smaller teams. So that essentially, to answer your question, whether, a lot of brands or people feel, that eventually a self-serve model will come in, agencies will cease to exist, and brands will have, everything run in-house. I don't think that's going to happen ever. But there will be a lot of enhancements and we are also working on that will keep happening on the platform side. Right from automation to, in fact, the entire journey of discovering, shortlisting, negotiating, and then taking the content live and then tracking, and then of course the learnings, because she also said that some content may not work sometimes, right? But that may not be something where the influencer is at fault. Maybe the understanding of how the content was to be made was not right. So these kind of learnings will eventually keep building on in a system from a platform perspective. This will become much more intelligent in terms of giving recommendations. For example, you select an influencer and you know that the content is very good, the engagement is very high, but should the influencer be creating a content for you or not, because you have a certain tonality in terms of how your product is positioned, right? Whether that will work well, augur well with the content that the influencer is making is something that will come as a recommendation through the platform itself. And a lot of automation, and one day I'm sure we are also working on it, the entire attribution model. Brands clearly identify that if they're working with a celebrity, it is largely to drive the reach. Doesn't really matter if they're using an iPhone themselves, which most of them do, but they might advertise for a Samsung or any other brand. But that is not just because what they are. Of course, it does to an extent. Some percentage of people might ask that question, but it also matters what's the TG, what's the followers index towards, what kind of phones are they most have the propensity to buy. So that's also matters for the brands, and selecting which influencers to do what kind of activity is also very, very important. So all this thing will get evolved eventually into a more platform-led model, and this entire piece, which has already evolved a lot in the last 3 years. I think it's going to, like you said, a lot of people are taking youngsters as conscious choice of becoming an influencer, which is an indication itself that it's going to become much more structured as a part of the overall digital marketing scheme. A lot of regulations are coming into place, like the ASCII guidelines and all that, to ensure that this becomes much more mainstream, and the influencers also become responsible when they are talking about a content or promoting a certain content. They are using tags like paid, collaboration and all of that, because even the followers should be well aware whether it's a paid content or an organic content. So I think those kinds of transparencies are coming in the value chain to make this much more evolved as we go on.
From your perspective, where do you see this move? Predictability is one thing that he is talking of. Legal clearances is the other thing that any which way brands need to be very, very careful with the content they create and they work with. But where do you see this piece moving? Will it stay in this zone of being a little pick and choose, or this will become a lot more structured and legally driven? And
I think in going forward, it will become more structured. So influencer marketing is here to stay and will grow much more in the coming days because of 2-3 reasons. One, obviously, influencer marketing gives you a very targeted audience, which has more credibility than the mass advertising, because obviously you are going to expert, so consumers believe that expert more. So if, for example, if a celebrity advertises something versus, for example, a protein shake, if a celebrity advertises versus an influencer who has proven himself in that field, so consumers will believe that particular person more. So I think more than even the reach factor also, it will be the fitment, it will be the type of person that they will reach. Now the region, in FMCG, in brands, the regional factor is also growing. I want to touch that factor also. So regional factor is also growing. So for example, in Dabur, we take different influencers for different regions. For West Bengal, we take a different influencer, Maharashtra different, because a national celebrity will not work for all. And if you sign a celebrity for different regions, it will cost you a lot. So I think that is one thing which, again, will take influencer marketing to the next level in the coming days. And as you rightly said, there will be a lot of guardrails which will bound it in terms of selection of influencers, in terms of I think the ASCI has given certain guardrails which have they followed. So that will also play a very important role. Plus, brands will also become more responsible while selecting the influencers. So I think it's here to stay. It will consolidate. But definitely agencies will stay because brands cannot do all the things. AI and all has to be very, very, very instrumental in making influencer marketing a big success in the coming days.
Samadhi, from your perspective, where do you see this thing whole go?
So, it's obviously a very complex situation, and, I'm not a clairvoyant, but I can make some guesses. And so there are two aspects of how I think this situation is going to evolve. We are already seeing green shoots, but we'll see how it evolves. But there are two big predictions from my end. I might be completely wrong. One is, what we will see is that influencers will completely be divided between those with huge fan following, right, who will all go behind a paywall at some point. They have to. They will stop endorsing XYZ products. They will only own businesses which they will endorse. Deepika is already doing it, right, in India. Internationally, you see Kendall, is doing it, and the entire, basically, Kardashian clan is doing it, and they will only endorse their products. So if they're into lifestyle, say, they will endorse their version of a Lululemon, their version of a Goop or a Glossier, and their version of a Nothing phone. That's it. Just those 2-3 brands which they own behind a paywall, only for people who want their content. So maybe just 6 brand posts a year, but the influence is so high because they're not doing it every day, and subscribers are ready to pay for their content. They don't. So it's basically what Netflix is vis-a-vis like a normal cable channel. That's the upper extreme of it. At the lower extreme, so all the micro, nano influencers who are in that sort of 500K and below followers, they will go to a completely self-serve model driven by AI. So for example, a male influencer who is using a DO, he shoots the video with a green can, and AI basically, today how ads are personalized and served to you based on your previous buying and shopping interests. Thanks to the API integrations, we have all these platforms. So maybe if I have been shopping for Setwet, I'll see a Setwet ka ad. And if somebody else is shopping for, say, Axe, they will see Axe. And all these people will basically register their content purely as, how all the websites are today on FB ad network and Google ad network. They'll just register there, and you and I, everybody can buy it on the basis of CPM, whatever model we choose, CPM, CPC, depending upon which part of the funnel we are targeting. So that's what I think is how AI is going to, totally hack this low end of the influencer model and create it into a self-serve, just like how Google, Facebook is today, and all the portals are today.
A lot more impersonal?
No, a lot more personalized for the lower end and very, very niche and personal for the higher end, who are the previous ones who are behind paywall, for the big ones.
Thank you. So if there are questions people want to ask, happy to take.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah. My name is Sumit Sehgal. I run my own consulting company called CMO on Order. My question is, and you could disagree completely on this, when brands start using the influencer marketing channel, do you think they have reached that stage of desperation where either they're questioning their own equity to influence a customer, or they have lost it completely when it comes to creating original, fresh, relevant content for their own consumers?
I think you'll hear very different answers from four of them.
It's a very, very challenging question, and I'm glad you asked that. So, again, personal opinion, I feel that it is just like you're outsourcing logistics, right? Today, the entire D2C industry is based because you have outsourced everything from production to logistics to delivery, everything, right? Similarly, content does not need to be created by the brand all the time. If the brand has the bandwidth, then yes. Otherwise, the influencers already have the eyes and ears of the customers. There is absolutely no harm in just hiring them as just another marketing channel.
And it's not that brands have reached that saturation point. Let's be very clear on, for example, if a content is to be promoted on YouTube, which is, a brand short video, it looks like a paid ad. There is always a skip button that the user is waiting for, right? Brands have also realized when they're using influencers, and that point was brought out beautifully, that you have to look at the strengths of how you're engaging with influencers. You can create a lot of hyper-local content, which is, if you were to do that in your traditional marketing channel, it will become too expensive for you to do that for every particular state and, create a particular communication in a vernacular language, right? So brands are using that, and, it does not mean that the traditional forms of advertising have become redundant. It is only becoming much more engaging and targeting a set of audiences in a much more evolved and appointment viewing manner, because you follow an influencer because you like the content that they make, and there is a bigger resonance with that particular content.
I just want to add one thing. The fact that these influencers have some level of credibility and trust with the followers. And whatever you do from a marketing standpoint on the brand, there are some things which you will not talk about directly in all your marketing activities. And that's where maybe the role of the influencer comes in. Because of, the followers also, the influencers followers also believe the influencer, right? So it's about talking about your brand in different ways, which you as a brand may not be able to, because you can keep telling the person I'm the best, they're not going to believe you, right? So I think that's, that angle of credibility and this trust factor is something which the influencer brings in.
Adding to Ashna's point, I think she rightly said, so it's not, brands are not at all desperate, first of all. So I think the point here is brands also see what their mass advertising is not able to do, that they get it done through the influencers. For example, for a technical product, we were just talking in the previous session about the unboxing. So unboxing is a time if you have 6 variants. So in the advertising, it will just go with a flick of a second in 15 to 20 seconds. But when you do it through an influencer, unboxing 6 variants of a particular thing and making it so exciting, so then the people who follow it becomes more creative in that sense. So influencer marketing is also used as a tool to educate customers, to engage with them, which maybe mass advertising cannot do. Mass advertising can be more at an awareness level, but yes, influencer marketing is connecting with you at a deeper level, engaging you, and conversion rate might be higher in influencer marketing versus mass advertising.
Thank you so much. Can we have a big round of applause for our panelists? That was quite a valuable session on influencer marketing. Definitely, we can use it as a tool that can give us higher conversion rate, and we're already doing that. Thank you so much for discussing the future of influencer marketing with us. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes when it comes from experts, we truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us on influencer engagement.